Hello adventurers, I'm Gray, and welcome to the Hytale blog post for June of 2020. This one is about landscape generation, and it kind of goes further in depth than previous blog posts that were about world design and that sort of thing, and it's of particular interest to people who really like learning about environmental design, world generation, that sort of thing, or anyone who's just curious about how the Hytale world will be made, like I am. If you've never watched these types of videos before, I'm basically going to be reading through this blog post with you guys, giving some comments, some theories about it, some expectations for the future, and we can discuss more about that sort of stuff in the comments. So, from the beginning, hi there! In this post we're going to take a closer look at Hytale's world generation system, specifically the various techniques we use to create dramatic, procedurally generated landscapes across each of the adventure mode's zones. We first discussed this topic in January of 2019, and you may wish to go back and read our introduction to World Gen in order to get a broad sense of how a rules-driven generation system works and what we're trying to achieve with it. This is just a quick reminder that the link to this blog post will be in the description, so you can check it out on your own as well, and any of the links they have in this blog post, you can click on it yourself and kind of refresh yourself on what they talked about before. Previously, they talked about things like caves, dungeons, prefabs or prefabricated content, and general world gen and sort of the order things are generated, how the zones work, that sort of thing. Today, we're going to get into some more specifics and demonstrate how Hytale modders will be able to customize world gen to suit their own purposes. The whole goal of this is to make Hytale as modifiable as possible, so we'll see how well they're able to achieve that. First though, we need to talk about noise, and not that kind of noise. Noise maps. So noise maps and height map interpretation. In the context of our procedural generation systems, a noise map is a set of random numbers that can be combined with a variety of functions to support a vast number of different kinds of generation. I'm going to go ahead and say I don't know too much about this sort of thing. I don't know much about it at all, it's not my field. However, from what I've read about it, it looks like an interesting way to make a very customizable sort of map of world generation. So we use noise maps for lots of different aspects of Hytale's content generation system, including all of the various landscape-related systems that we'll be detailing later in this article. One of the most striking uses is in the formation of the zones themselves. So I can't really gather too much out of this, but they go into more detail in a second. This image is from a simple visualization tool and previews the result of combining noise maps with another important feature of landscape generation, height map interpretation, which I'm assuming is what gives the different vertical layers of the landscape. In this case, the environments being stimulated are the rocky plateaus of Zone 2. Height map interpretation involves additional sets of numbers that allow us to establish how high or low certain noise map features will appear on the terrain being generated. This is getting pretty technical. By tweaking height map interpretation thresholds, we can, for example, take a set of noise maps that would create a winding waterway and adapt them to produce dramatic river canyons. So basically, you take the river that would normally be about river level, you know, not too deep, and decrease their layer dramatically in a vertical plane, and then you'll have like a big sort of canyon sort of thing with a river at the bottom, and that's one way to adjust this sort of thing. Our technical artists learn noise map composition as a craft, says World Gen programmer Slikey. They have a large toolbox of different noise types and operations for combining them. It takes time to learn to balance complexity, performance, and design. We're constantly discovering new ways to combine noise maps to generate unique terrain or place prefabs in unexpected ways. When we're happy with our configuration of a biome's noise maps and thresholds, we implement these rules into the game itself. Alright, and we can see here multiple noise maps being added to a landscape one after another, starting off a general landscape and then introducing the rules for Zone 2 rivers and mountain biomes. So let's take a look at that. Full screen it. So it starts off looking pretty much just like a flat desert plain, but as it expands, there's much more vertical layers, a river is added, the river starts having really tall walls around it, so it looks more canyon or pretty much more steep in general. There's still not too much beyond the sand in the river, but we'll get into more things further on. This is just showing off the height maps and the landscapes. The gradual growth and complexity that you see in this clip is for illustrative purposes only. In reality, once the noise maps and thresholds for an area have been established, the landscape is generated all at once. That makes sense. We're not going to be seeing landscapes generate like this when we're playing the game. Layers, covers, and prefabs. At this stage, we've got a landscape of plenty of blocks and a few major features like rivers, mountains, and shorelines. The process of giving environments their personality occurs across multiple stages, each with its own procedural generation process. So you can tell that this environment is a little bit more complex than the ones that we were just seeing in that video, and it goes into detail about that. We start with layers. These are another kind of noise map that is used to specify both the depth of certain kinds of blocks in the terrain, as well as the kinds of blocks that will appear on the surface. The screenshot above shows the various layers that comprise a landscape in Zone 3, which is the frozen place, Borea, with plants and vegetation removed to make it easier to see the underlying materials. So normally there'd be a lot more plants and vegetation on the ground, but here it's removed so that you can see sort of the landscape a little bit better. And as you can tell, there's a whole lot of different layers of verticality. However, there is a sort of wave-like pattern as well, and that's likely because of the noise map and the system they use for generation. Which makes sense, because I feel like that's sort of how it would form in real life due to erosion and that sort of thing. There tends to be some sort of pattern. Alright, and this is even more detailed than before. You can see all sorts of grass, plants, that sort of thing. So the next step involves covers. Cover refers to incidental environmental details like grass, foliage, mushrooms, crystal outcrops, and so on. And by configuring the covers for a given area, we can tell the world gen system what kinds of plants should appear on which layers. For example, we might establish that dense shrubbery should only appear on grassy layers, while moss might occur on rocky surfaces underground. And you can kind of see how the plants, actually, it's better like this. You can kind of see the plants and how they form. Certain tall plants might appear, some mushrooms might appear in like darker places. But once you get out into the field, where you see the red trees in the back, you don't see mushrooms around there anymore because it's not as shady, it's not as damp. There's a lot more wild flowers and things like that over there. So it can detect sort of what areas have what sort of feel to it, what kind of lighting and that sort of thing, and put in the correct cover for that area. Okay, prefabs provide the finishing touches and are frequently will give environments their specific identity. Prefabs are arrangements of blocks created by a technical artist that are distributed throughout the environment by the world gen system. Alright? And if you couldn't tell in here, I'm guessing prefabs would be things like that house or that sort of temple on the right side. That's a prefab. Like even these rocks that are scattered around, you see them everywhere. Those are prefabs as well. Trees are also prefabs. And you can kind of refresh yourself on this by going back to the prefab blog post that they mentioned earlier. That was the first link in this, I believe. But basically, you can kind of specify how often they'll appear, where they'll appear, that sort of thing. Here's an example of the transformation that takes place when layers, cover, and incidental prefabs are applied to a new landscape. So this is step by step how all of this happens. Let me full screen this again. Okay, so as you can see, it starts off looking almost like a moon or another planet or something. It's completely barren, completely gray and rocky, but just changing it layer by layer, step by step, adding more. They change the blocks, they add prefabs, which are trees, and then they add the covers, which are the plants and things like that. And it turns this foreign, like alien, barren place into a sort of real-looking taiga. And that's pretty cool. I like that. I feel like the people who make these sorts of blog posts, I hope they're getting paid pretty well, because a lot of this stuff is really cool visualization of the game development process, and I really like it. The prefab system also supports larger structures and points of interest, which you may remember from this blog post, once again, linked in the description. Not this link right here, but this blog post in general, so you can click on this later on if you want to, from March last year. We built thousands of prefabs to support adventure modes, world gen system, and modders will have the freedom to use these or build their own when customizing the world. I want to interrupt this broadcast real quick to say that this video has been sponsored by nobody. This video is sponsored by nobody. I've made no money on YouTube over the past 5 years or so I would appreciate a like or a subscription if you want to keep seeing Hytale content or content in general come out, because I really love doing what I'm doing here. To continue on, prefabs are configured separately in order to assure that their appearance in the world is believable and feels special. Zones where larger prefabs can appear are mapped out using a different kind of noise map. And this is another example of a noise map. It's much larger scale, from what I can tell. This is an example of a Voronoi noise. That is a mouthful. Voronoi noise, which creates cell-like patterns. For Hytale, we use these cells to establish where large prefabs can and can't occur. In the image above, the purple spots represent areas where a large prefab might be encountered, and collectively account for about 20% of the generated space. If we wished, we could increase or reduce this density. I want to comment real quick on the whole use of noise maps and prefabs and that sort of thing. I feel like all of these design choices were picked for the sole reason that they want it to be as customizable and modifiable as possible. Like, noise maps allow world generation to be very easily customized, at least from what I see, by people who even only have a layman's knowledge of the systems and that sort of thing. Like, people can just mess with the settings and see what happens, and change how the entire world is generated based on that. And you can modify just the percentages that different prefabs spawn in, and the whole world would look so much different. Like, if they turn it up to 100% or maybe like 80% or something, you might be seeing large towns spawn in just naturally by turning up the right prefabs to the percentages you want. Or you can just add like giant rocks everywhere if you feel like doing that. But it's all very customizable, very easy to do, and I like that. I feel like it was all purposefully chosen for that reason. When taken all together, layers, cover, and prefabs help us create environments that combine the dynamism of procedural generation with a sense of purpose that comes from incorporating hand-designed buildings and environmental features. World Gen is an amazing system, says technical artist Amber. It gives us so much control and allows us to be incredibly creative with the system. We've often created landscapes and showed them to Slikey, and he said, "Wow, I had no idea you could even do that." Here's another example of a sort of landscape with a lot going on in this. There are other aspects of World Gen that we haven't covered in today's blog, particularly cave systems, dungeons, and the ways that zones intersect with one another. These are huge subjects unto themselves, so we're planning to cover them separately in our next deep dive into Hytale's generation systems. Keep in mind, it says our next deep dive, not our next blog post, so it might not be the next blog post that they talk about the caves and the systems and dungeons and things like that in more detail. But the next time they decide to talk about Hytale's generation, this is what they're going to talk about. Most likely, caves and dungeons and things like that, and I'm excited about that sort of stuff. I want to see more info on how the cave systems and all that works. Also, just to take one more detailed look at this image here, we have our explorer, of course. They got their backpack, they got their armor, and we have a skeleton guy up in the fortress. And there's not too much new in this. There's a bear, there's some pigeons once again. They're being very careful not to show us much that we haven't seen before. But this is an example of how prefabs can sort of fit into the environment that's been generated. Continuing on, we hope this article has helped you understand a bit more about Hytale's world is created. All the systems that we've described in this post will be accessible to modders through extensively customizable configuration files. By combining asset creation in Hytale Model Maker, our block building tools, I'm assuming they're in-game block building tools, and the underlying world generation system, you'll be able to generate unique environments of your own. Here's one we put together ourselves. And as you can see, this one looks sort of like an extraterrestrial planet. Like another planet, sort of like a Mars sort of thing, except it has lots of alien looking trees. It has little patches of water. The world looks very red and orange. And there's just a little sci-fi looking base right here in the middle of it, which I'm not sure would have been a generated prefab or if they built it by hand. Let's continue reading. This custom landscape uses all the techniques we outlined in this post, including new prefabs, to realize a sci-fi setting within Hytale's World Gen system. We can't wait to see what Hytale modders are able to do. Hytale's going to have so many different ways to do the same thing or different things. For example, this house right here might have been built by hand, right? Like you might have built this base by hand. However, at the same time, it might have been created in Hytale Model Maker as a prefab, and then you could scatter them around the world automatically using noise maps and things like that. Or perhaps the house was handmade, but these sort of lamp posts or electric posts were made as prefabs and they were scattered around, which is why there's several of them scattered around this area, all identical in appearance. Trees are definitely prefabs, so these like alien looking trees. Okay, I can't exactly tell which ones are done using asset creation in Hytale Model Maker, which one is done in game. World generation is of course the terrain, the hills, the valleys, the water, and sort of the color of the landscape as well. It's all going to be super customizable, and I feel like the custom maps that people make for Hytale are going to be absolutely crazy, and I'm really excited to see what people do with that sort of stuff. It's probably going to be above my level. Like, I might be able to make some simple custom maps, but people are going to be making some amazing stuff in this game that I could not dream of making myself, and I'm really excited to try that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's pretty much all for this Hytale blog post. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. If you want to see more Hytale content, I'd appreciate a like, comment, or a subscription. There will definitely be more coming on the way, and it really does help me out. I really love Hytale, so I want to keep following it and playing it once the game releases next year, hopefully. That's all for now, and I hope to see you all on the next adventure.